Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to be talking about the way we label ideologies. With us tonight, Daniel Thomas, Thaddeus Paul Hamus, and Merrick Moses. Welcome, panel. The SCOTUS ruling eliminating Roe will have the effect of forcing women who do not feel comfortable with their circumstances to have babies they don't want at this time in their lives. Is not forcing women to bring babies into a situation where their care and upbringing cannot be adequately and responsibly supported the very essence of cruel punishment? Dan, isn't that cruelty right there?
Once again, this is going to be our new Civil War issue. And let me tell you why. Because both sides feel very, very righteous, and both sides feel we are 100% right. And on the anti-choice side, you're protecting babies, because the minute there's vaginal penetration, I guess, there's a baby. There's a fully formed baby that needs to be protecting and needs love. On the other side,
let me interrupt you for a second and tell you the way it was in the 1950s. I was born in 52, and Thaddeus, you can confirm this or dispute it. We were led to believe that the only reason to have any sex at all was to have a baby. That if you wanted to have sex for pleasure, that was a sin. The reason to have sex was to conceive. And that's what we were led to believe before Vatican II came around. And we'll let Thaddeus comment on that later. But go ahead with your point.
Okay. So on the other side, the side that I am on, and as I look around at this decidedly male panel, I really hope I am not speaking out of turn here, but I think that we are really talking about bodily autonomy for people who can become pregnant. It is a matter of bodily autonomy, and I would never tell a woman that she has to or should not carry a child like that is the choice of the person who can become pregnant. That is not literally anything to do with me. But I really feel like we're over here, we're fighting for women, and over there, they're fighting for children. And it's not, it's going to get very, very, there's not a part of this that isn't already very ugly. But I think this will be our new Civil War issue, because both of us think we're right. Both of us have our lines drawn in the sand. And I do think that it took a long time, but the very successful overturning of Roe has created a lot of problems with the trigger laws and laws moving through the states to ban abortion care altogether. Doctors are not treating women for things like ectopic pregnancies, which will kill the mother before the fetus is viable. So everybody's going down with that ship. But I also think on the conservative side, there's a thought of these are the people arguing against abortion, the anti-choice people, don't exist in a world where a baby is ever a bad thing. When you are itinerant and barely able to keep a roof over your head, if you're able to keep a roof over your head at all, and you know that there is not a social safety net that's going to be able to help you survive, and you don't have resources or family that you can draw on who can take you in to help you with this, a baby is a terrible thing. When your baby is, when you know it's not going to survive, when you know that it is horribly, horribly ill and is not going to live very long, and it's going to suffer the entire time it exists. These are things that those people do not think about when they are arguing about the sanctity of life and every life is precious. I cannot prioritize the potential for a person over the well-being of an actual person. I can't do it. I have to look at the parents and the mother and what are their circumstances, and if they want to make that choice, I will let them make that choice. It's not for me to decide or involve myself or judge in any way, because I'm not in that position.
Or anyone in government
Right.
making that choice.
I mean, I do think that we should be making that choice a little easier for people. And this is a brief Republican soapbox for a minute. Um, if you want people to have more babies, make it easier to have the babies, provide the social safety net. If somebody has to quit their job because they have to take care of a newborn all of a sudden, that traps them into a cycle of poverty. And if somebody has to stay with a man who hits her because she's pregnant and she can't afford to take care of that child, then she has to stay with him. She's trapped in that abusive relationship. So not only does she continue to suffer, but that child learns that it's okay to hit women. So if it's a girl, it's going to grow up to follow that same pattern. And if it's a boy, it's going to grow up to hit women. So a new baby is not always a good thing, and we need to let people have the bodily autonomy to make that decision. And we only ever say don't have sex if you're not ready for a baby to women. We don't say it to men, because men get off the hook.
Before I move this over to Merrick, I want to ask you a quick comment about this. You mentioned the Civil War. You see that Civil War becoming violent, deadly?
um I Given the manifestos of all the mass shooters lately, I think we've already started.
Okay.
They all
Merrick,
identify with a particular party. Just saying.
yeah, Merrick, forcing women to have babies when they're not really in a situation where they can provide a good home for that baby. Isn't that cruelty in itself?
It's abject cruelty. I am a religious person. I am a minister of the gospel. So I have ministered to people who have had these procedures, and it is not for me to judge. And I think that anytime government steps into a very sensitive equation like this, it's never a good look. The reason why the right wing is scrambling to enact these draconian laws is because they are afraid of white genetic annihilation. A woman named Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she talked about it years ago. And the theory is that that a representative from Arizona said it. She was like, thank you, Mr. Trump, for saving white life. And so, this weird fear of genetic annihilation has spilled over into the consciousness of a good third of the country. And so they are prime for the pump with all these conspiracy theories and about about abortion and things of that nature. And also, too, we can't forget how patriarchy plays a role in this, because these anti-choice measures really squarely focus on the bodily autonomy of women. They do not focus on the bodily autonomy of biological men. So if we're going to play these games, then let's play the game all out. And so if there are states that say, well, a life begins at conception, well, social child support. So should insurance. If it now in their minds, a fertilized egg is a person, then that person needs a social security number. You see where I'm going? And so because these people are very malevolent in nature, but not maybe too swift in the mind, they don't think these things out. And so when we start asking these questions, it's always a no but, a no but, a no but, because their plan is ill-conceived and based on a misinterpretation of a 6,000-year-old text known as the Holy Bible. And we need
Well,
to, you know what I'm saying? We need to understand where these people are coming from, because they're being poisoned by religion that demands ultimate sacrifice and subservience to its doctrines.
yeah, we had a minister on a few shows back that said that she was pretty well versed in the Hebrew Bible, which was the Old Testament, and she said that there was nothing in there that indicated that the life of the mother was not more important than the life of the fetus. Okay, Thaddeus. First, I want to check out your remembrance of the idea of what we were told pre-Vatican II about sex, that you couldn't have sex unless you had the intention of impregnating the woman, and anything other than that was a mortal sin. Is that your recollection?
Well, it's close to it. I do recall that when they said, the primary purpose of sex is procreation. We use a religious term rather than a biological one. But as I learned it, even back then, they said that it's perfectly okay for a married couple to enjoy each other as long as every sexual act is open to procreation. That is, they do not do anything to prevent a baby from happening. So that's pretty close. But basically, if it's not specifically for procreation or open to procreation at the very, very least, and in that case, it's allowable. It's not a sin, but you're skating on thin ice when you actually have sex for pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, abortions, whenever or having babies whenever you're not really ready in your circumstances, financially or for whatever reason. Essentially cruelty?
Not only that. And with this, I pick up my shovel and dig that line in the sand all the way down to bedrock. This is a rank presumption. The law preventing abortion is a rank presumption of power that no governing body has by any interpretation of any system of society. The legislation of one individual's right to govern his or her own body is so elemental to humanity that any effort to enforce one behavior over another within that person's body is a moral and ethical abomination beyond the reach of human language to describe. All laws governing one person's body by others are, by pure definition, illicit. None of them, even the ones that have been around for centuries, should have ever been enacted. The restrictions and prohibitions on abortion and other related acts have proven lethal to otherwise innocent people whenever and wherever they have been enacted and enforced. Nothing short of a total, universal, and worldwide repeal of all such laws is needed to rectify this ongoing wrong. Now, the pro-lifers will dash back at this very quickly, but I would have more regard for them if any of them would lift a single finger to protect life after the moment of birth. Amen.
Right. A recent event in Texas highlighted another policy from that ideological group when 53 human beings literally roasted to death while trapped in a steel enclosed trailer. While the idea of allowing people trying to escape persecution to cross the border to participate in the promise of American life sort of seems like it might be a decent thing to do, does not the current immigration policy or lack thereof produce the kind of results that you consider human cruelty? If not cruelty, how would you characterize it? That is, how do you characterize our current immigration policy?
Well, our current immigration policy is a total mishmash of things that sometimes contradict each other. Now, the previous administration, who for reasons of decency should remain nameless here, loudly and continually trumpeted the true fact that undocumented entry into our sacred country is a CRIME, and that's all caps, boldface, 100-point type, +6 exclamation points. It's a crime. Now, some of their so-called policies remain in place to our national shame, having been predicated on that statement with the admonition that a crime's a crime, so we can treat all comers as criminals. And we've seen that as, you know, people have been treated like rapists and murderers just for coming across the border. Now, the unread fine print about the crime of crossing the border is that it's not a first-class felony the way they've been treating it, but rather a misdemeanor or one step up from jaywalking. Now, it's this overblown and, dare I say, bald-faced racist enforcement that, in its utter cruelty, has prompted people to such desperate measures as were so horribly lethal to those unhappy victims. May they rest in peace. What is making a more sensible approach unreachable and unpopular to a lot of people is this incessant drumbeat of fact-free fear-mongering about refugees, especially and pointedly brown-skinned ones who don't speak English.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Dan, current immigration policy, the definition of cruelty?
It's extremely, extremely difficult. Like people who are lawyers trained in immigration law don't know all the ins and outs of our immigration policy. So somebody who picked up their child and walked 1,500 miles to try and escape someplace really terrifying and dangerous where they and their family might not survive. Things were really bad there. And I said before that the Republican Party and the conservative movement has this idealized version of what America used to be. And I do think a lot of the people who are trying to come here have a misconception about what America is. Last year, when Kamala Harris was in Guatemala, she took a lot of flack for saying in her speech, if you show up, you're going to get turned away. Do not just show up here. Do not come. But what got left out was she's telling you not to come because it's a dangerous trip. You are going to get hurt. You are going to be trafficked. You are going to be exploited. You are going to pay a lot of money to very bad people who are going to do very bad things to you. And here we have 53 people who I assume paid a lot of money to be smuggled across that border and then were abandoned to die in an oven. And that, while that is utterly reprehensible, yeah, represents a failure of our immigration system. And I hope that we are capable of learning something from this politically, but I don't think that we are going to. I think those people died and they suffered horribly, and that absolutely needs to be acknowledged. I can't imagine what they must have gone through in their final moments. But if we don't change our immigration policy about this, then that suffering was in vain. Like, how terrified must you have been at your home to get up and leave it, to come someplace where you didn't know anybody, didn't speak the language, because you thought it might be safer there, and then to die on the way. That's utterly, utterly horrific. And it's a failure. Every American bears the guilt for that. But unless we elect people who are going to create an immigration system or fix the current one, that blood is just on all of our hands.
And I don't see that happening either.
No, absolutely.
I don't see any sign of a fix anywhere in the near future. Merrick, you with us still?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The question is the immigration policy, the definition of cruelty.
I would not only say cruelty, but I would also say racism. And I look at an example of Haitians versus Cubans. So the Cubans have, what is it, wet foot, dry foot policy, in which as soon as their toe hits America, they're safe. But the Haitians, who have been victims of damn near a 200 plus year old smear campaign based on their revolution in 1804, coupled with the fact that they were extorted by France to pay them for their lost property, and they were talking about enslaved Africans, to the exploitation of the American government many times over in the latter half of the 19th century and through the 20th century. I think that we would do well to go on a tour of reparations and what that would look like, because the United States has created this problem throughout the hemisphere. So whether it be the Cubans, who are largely favored because some of them identify as white, to Haitians, who are the poorest of the poor and have been kept in that condition through abysmal American foreign policy, to El Salvador, to Nicaragua, and even to my father's country of Panama, the level of destabilization that the American government has caused in that region is really horrific. And frankly, if you want to talk about it, terroristic. I mean, John Bolton has openly bragged about fomenting revolutions and coups in different countries. Like he said that like maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, he was bragging about that. Like he's such an important
no.
person, he could actually pull off a coup himself.
Yeah, that's the thing. My father was almost got caught in that Noriega mess when the Americans invaded Panama to oust Noriega. He left the day before he left there the day before they invaded. His mother had died and he came back home. And the next day, that's when they invaded. They came off the canal zone and killed people and all of that. That being said, I mean, it's ridiculous. And I think part of why we're here is because the American populace has no idea of the history America has played to ruin and destabilize Latin America, thus leading to this crisis. You know, my father came here over 14 cents. Other people that I'm hearing, they came over here because they had, the gangs had threatened to kidnap people, get people into gangs, turn people into prostitutes, like all that other stuff. You know what I'm saying? And I think Americans need to know that the government is partly responsible. And if that is the case, what are we going to do about it? I support Kamala Harris when she said don't come. I get African immigrants that hit me up on Facebook because I'm in. I talk to queer and trans African folk. I'm like, don't come here. Why? Don't come here. Because you thinking that you're Kenyan or Tanzanian or Nigerian, they see you as black. Now you're a target. They don't know this beast like we know this beast. So I think that people have to understand why America is attractive to desperate people, in part because America has destabilized the regions of desperate people.
Because their place of living is just so miserable that America's got to be better than the misery they're living in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Who wants to hear that their 6-year-old daughter is being threatened with stuff because you own a library in a town? Like, what? That's a thing that's going on, and it is directly traced to our interventions in Latin America from the 19th century up until the 21st century. We got to recognize that. But again, they don't even want to teach American history. You think they're going to teach about American intervention? You think they're going to teach about carry the big stick doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine? Please. Somebody might even think the Monroe Doctrine is a plate at Big Boy or something.
We think Banana Republic is a clothing store. We don't know where that came from anymore.
Okay, cruel and racist.